The Simpit Indycar series headed out to mid-Ohio for the 7th race of the season. They would be doing 38 laps of the 2.25 mile long 13-turn road course. Naruko Ishida was the top qualifier and the only driver to break into the sixes with a qualifying time of 106.462. This was over a half of a second faster than Ricardo Skyvon, who started in second. As Ishida brought the field to the green flag, they worked their way through the twisty entrance to the shortest front stretch that I can think of, and they are quickly up to speed as Ishida got a clean look at turn 1. Skyvon and Saunders fell right into line and the leaders got things underway. The top 5 made it to corner 2 without trouble, but Pierre Bourdon checked up a bit and started to lose the car. I checked up behind him slightly, tapped him, and then I was slammed from behind by Liam Quinn. My race was over 2 turns in, and the rest of the field carried on. Meanwhile, Eric Davis challenged Pasi Valtonen down the backstretch. With Davis holding the inside line through the kink, he was able to get by clean and take over the 4th position, dropping Valtonen to 5th. By the end of the first lap, Ishida, Skyvon, and Sanders had built up a gap over Davis, Valtonen, and Tezcan running together in 4th, 5th, and 6th. On lap 5, Quentin Young and Joni Kajanen got together in turn 2. Young got spun around. Kajanen got the spot with both cars continuing on. By the end of the 5th lap, Ishida had built up a 3-second lead over Skyvon and Saunders, who were still racing for second. A little ways back was Eric Davis in 4th and Valtonen in 5th. After 10 laps of racing, up front things were much the same. Ishida with a comfortable lead over Skyvon, still leading Saunders in 3rd. A little further back in the grid, John Hill had been dealing with a mirror full of Michael Thompson, as those two had fought it out since the drop of the green flag over 7th place. Pierre Bourdon, who had recovered from his earlier spin, ran in 9th right behind them. Another good battle on track was for 12th place as Steven Smith led the way over Dario Rikov and Joni Kajanen. And then Kajanen took himself out of that battle as he spun the car coming off of the final corner. A few laps later, the battle continued for Smith and Rikov as they came up on Rico Royha, who was running in 11th. In the final section of the circuit, Royha goes off wide. Smith ends up also going wide off the track, and Rikov takes both spots, moving him into 11th place. On lap 15, Skyvon was still in a heated battle for 2nd place with Alex Saunders. Then coming over the hill on the back portion of the track, Skyvon got a little loose, but he saved it. But this loss of speed allowed Saunders to get by and get a good gap on him. By the halfway point of the race, Naruko Ishida had built up a sizable lead over Alex Saunders, who on lap 19 turned in for pit lane. This allowed Skyvon to get by him for 2nd place. Davis in 4th also headed for pit lane, but Pasi Valtonen stayed out. When Saunders pulled off pit lane, he found himself still in 3rd with a race against the clock and Skyvon awaiting his pit stop. Then on lap 20, Valtonen came to pit lane. Prior to pit rotations, he and Davis had been running very close, and when Valtonen came out of the pits, it was still and once again behind Eric Davis, now back into 4th place. Lap 23, Skyvon goes for pit lane, and we would then have our eyes on Alex Saunders to see where they ended up after the pit rotations. Skyvon came off pit lane as Saunders is working his way down the front stretch. Skyvon comes out just ahead of him, and the battle for 2nd continues on with 15 laps remaining in the race. Then on lap 24, we would see the leader, Naruko Ishida, while still running all alone entering the pits. When he left the pits, he was still unchallenged, and his lead had grown to over 10 seconds over the Skyvon and Saunders pair, who were still fighting for 2nd place. On lap 25, we saw a tense moment of the race when Pasi Valtonen was fighting with Yigit Tezcan for 5th. They came up on a pair of lap-down cars fighting for position, and while trying to weave their way through traffic, Valtonen slowed up slightly, and Tezcan got a run on him on the inside going into turn 2. Tezcan took the position, and they still had one lap-down car to deal with going on to the backstretch. With 10 laps to go, Ishida was now on cruise control out front. At this point, lap cars were his only concern as the cars had strung out over the entire track. Skyvon and Saunders, a ways back, were still fighting it out for second, and they were dealing with lap cars that would get into the mix as well. Eric Davis was comfortably running in fourth all alone as Jigit Tescan and Pasi Valtonen were a little ways back fighting for that fifth position. Running in seventh place was John Hill, followed immediately by Michael Thompson in eighth and Pierre Bourdon in ninth. This trio had been running in this order and this proximity since the beginning of the race and all the way through the pit stops. But it was at this moment that Bourdon got a great run off of turn 1, drafted Thompson up the hill, and passed him going into turn 2 for 8th place. Meanwhile, running in 10th place was Karsten Berdowie. Lap 34 and the battle for 5th had been heating up for many laps. Coming off of turn 1, Valtonen took a look on Tescan. Tescan was able to hold him off. With 5 to go, Naruko Ishida is out to nearly a 20-second lead over Ricardo Skyvon running in second. Alex Saunders had dropped back a little bit, but was still in the hunt running in third. Eric Davis still held on to fourth, and the battle for fifth was still going on between Jigit Tescan and Pasi Valtonen. But on lap 35, Tescan got a little too greedy with the throttle, and he spun it coming off of turn 2. He runs off into the grass and nearly onto the track going the opposite way. He then regroups, gets back on track, and maintains 6th position. And that is exactly the order in which they would finish. Naruko Ishida dominated the day and won by a 20.4 second margin over Ricardo Skyvon in second. Alex Saunders finished a few seconds back in third, with Eric Davis having a quiet but a good finish in fourth. And after an exhausting race, Pasi Valtonen came home in a very well-earned 5th position. Jigit Tescan recovered and held on to 6th spot over John Hill, who had fought Pierre Bourdon all the way to the line for 7th, with Bourdon settling for 8th. Michael Thompson finished a stone's throw back of those two in 9th, and Karsten Berdowie finished in 10th. After 7 rounds of racing, Ricardo Skyvon has a strong lead on the points with 648. John Hill still holds on to 2nd place with 551, and Alex Saunders has moved back up into 3rd with 464. Michael Thompson and myself round out the top 5. Next week, the series heads to Charlotte, North Carolina for 100 laps of high G-force oval racing. If you would like more information on this series or to see any of the other race recaps, please head to thesimpit.com and look for the IndyCar Series tab. Congratulations once again to Naruko Ishida, and we will see you next week from Charlotte.